Okay, all this is the module on harassment, bullying, and abuse. Just taking a short look at this to get a sense of some of the legal issues in this area. We're actually going to start outside of student issues just for one slide, and then we'll jump back into student issues. When we think of harassment, I think a lot of people usually think of the employment context, and that's not wrong. And usually that's where harassment usually resides. There's a lot of litigation there. And we'll get to student harassment in just a second. There's a lot of litigation emerging in that area. But historically, harassment has sort of been employment based, and it's taken two different forms: quid pro quo and hostile work environment. All right, let's start quid pro quo. Quid pro quo harassment is harassment that is this for that type of harassment. All right, you go on a date with me, and in exchange, I'll consider you for a promotion. All right, get this for that. That is quid pro quo harassment, and specifically prohibited by law. So if you find yourself in those situations, either men or women, over time, you'll know that that type of quid pro quo, give this for that relationship is considered legal harassment. The other type of harassment that exists that can bring lawsuits is hostile work environment. All right, so sometimes you'll find situations in the employment context where a hostile environment is created for a single employee or a group of employees. All right, so for instance, we can take the teacher's lounge as a space that could be, we'll just make a hostile work environment for men in the teacher's lounge, that the women in a particular school are pretty open with their feelings and thoughts and are willing to talk about sexual issues or whatever else that's going on, and creating a hostile environment for men as they enter the teacher's lounge, and it's really not a place that they feel comfortable being. That's just an example. Clearly, we see harassment go the other direction just as frequently or more frequently. But that is the hostile work environment. It's harder to prove, harder to make that case, but it is a case that can be made against employers or other groups of employees. All right, is a bit around employer to employee harassment. Let's talk then employee to student harassment. So this is sort of the worst case scenario here, where you have a teacher that is specifically harassing or abusing kids. This kind of stuff is definitely prohibited. It's prohibited under Title IX. If school officials have actual knowledge of this harassment from an employee to a student and they don't do anything about it, the school itself can be liable. Of course, the employee that does the harassing is personally liable for that harassment, but even the school can be liable for harassment if they knew about it and didn't do anything about it. Okay, that is employee to student. All right, now when it comes to issues of sexual relationships between teachers and students, even older students that are 16 years old, 18 years old, 19 years old, absolutely prohibited with zero exceptions. Any relationships between employees and students is absolutely prohibited, and you will be fired, no questions asked, in that scenario. Now, taking a step forward to student harassment, this is the emerging area of law that has really developed over the last decade. So Title IX contains in it provisions that prohibit gender-based harassment broadly. All right, and that really has come to develop in schools to create this sort of three-part legal test to determine whether or not a school is liable for student-to-student harassment. So if a school district knows about a student that's harassing another kid, they don't do anything about that harassment, and the harassment is severe, persistent, and offensive, then you can have a case against the school for student-to-student harassment. Okay? That, of course, implies you all as school officials. When you see students harassing other students, If you know about it and don't do anything about it, you're opening up not only yourself but the school to potential liability under Title IX for student-to-student harassment. So how do you deal with this? Obviously, do something about harassment when you see it happening in the schools. The law requires that you do something. It doesn't even require you to do the right thing. It just requires you to do something. Take some positive action, some positive response to an incident of harassment that you have witnessed as a school official. And if you're doing that, you're protecting not only yourself, but the school legally, and you're also, of course, helping out the student that is being harassed. All good things. So be really active in stopping harassment in the school environment. All right, awesome. Now, bullying, just shortly on bullying. So, we've cared about bullying, and this issue has blown up since Columbine and the rash of school shootings that have really made a lot of the news over the last decade or two. That has led to anti-bullying statutes all over the state, including Kentucky. Okay, so Kentucky has an anti-bullying statute that doesn't mention the word bullying, but it really requires school districts to have much clearer provisions around harassment and harassing communications, including the internet. All right, so trying to tamp down on some cyberbullying. Okay, now all this does is require school districts to develop policies. All right, so we're going to rely on school policy in this instance more than state law. Where students have not been successful is bringing bullying lawsuits against schools or school officials, that they saw bullying and didn't do anything about it. So far, that's not been successful in the courts. It's only when that is called harassment and they bring harassment-based lawsuits that we've seen legal success on the part of students. All right, so bullying is absolutely something that we should regulate and we should have policies on, but the law is not really creating anything new here. We should have been stopping bullying as school officials all along. It's something that should have always been prohibited and disciplined. And all that this new law is saying, well, relatively new law is saying, is that we should actively try to stop bullying and follow our own policies on it. All right, last one, child abuse. Okay, so we have a child abuse statute here in Kentucky, and you all as school officials are mandatory reporters of child abuse. And when we say mandatory, it is mandatory that you report child abuse when you sense it. All right, it is not mandatory for you to conduct your own investigations. It is only mandatory for you to report the abuse when you see it. Now, schools always have some reporting chain of command that gives you as a teacher some next step to take inside the school environment, so you don't necessarily feel like you have to call the child abuse hotline yourself. It certainly is an option. You can do that. There's the number. You're welcome to call the child abuse hotline. However, there are reporting ladders in schools that you can use. School social workers, guidance counselors, even school principals all can help guide you through this child abuse process. If you feel like you think there really is child abuse and all of those people are absolutely ignoring it, then you may go ahead and want to initiate the child abuse report on your own. All right, so you should just absolutely be reporting abuse when you see it. Do keep in mind there is severe penalties for teachers or other adults who use abuse as a weapon against parents, who make up cases of abuse in order to get back at or try to harm parents of students in your classes. Never ever do that. It is a felony to do that. You'll of course lose your job and may have to face charges yourself for bringing those kinds of cases. So just keep it in mind. Don't worry too much about that side. I just want you to put that in the back of your mind somewhere. Never think about doing that. You should always, though, just be reporting the abuse when you see it up that chain of command in your school environment. Please do so. It's good for everyone involved, even though there might be some short-term discomfort. It helps us get to longer-term remedies for kids, which is what we're all about as schools. Hope you found this module useful.